Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. Today, I will talk about my two favorite topics, money and love. If we take a look at the newspapers, we quickly realize that the big concerns of our time are the increasing income inequality, the environmental pollution, and the financial debt crisis. In addition, unemployment, an increasingly excessive consumer society, price bubbles, deflation, as well as inflation are threatening our societies, not only in Europe, but in many parts of the world. Not few people are therefore once again questioning competition, the wealth increasing effects that are attributed to a free market economy in economic theory. However, these problems do not come about from the free market economy, but from our unnatural design of the money. And this unnatural design of money provokes that our money is not neutral, unlike conventional economic theory would have us believe. The unneutrality of money is probably the main reason for market failure, which unfortunately is recognized only by few economists. Today, I will explain that if we reformed our money in the way Silvio Gesell once suggested, we have the chance to establish a sustainable and fair economic order. Let us call it market economy that serves people and not vice versa. If we recognized that making money is not an end in itself, we could even move from a market economy that serves people to a true economy of neighborly love, in which people achieve happiness serving each other through the use of their talents. The presentation is divided into two parts. In the first part, I'm going to explain the problems that come about from the lacking neutrality of money and how these could be solved. And even though the solution I will present is already 100 years old, the understanding that the big concerns our world faces today can be solved with the solution, in fact, is new. In the second part, I will show how competition, if it works, and especially if it is not perverted by unnatural money, can compel us to behave as we loved one another. Of course, even better than competition forcing us to behave as if we loved one another would be if we really loved our neighbor. So I will sketch a utopian model of an economy based on neighborly love as the driving force behind our action. So let us start with the role of money. Money is supposed to be a medium that facilitates the exchange of real goods and services. We could compare money with the blood of the economy. The blood is supposed to circulate in the body. And if the blood circulation stacks, then the body gets ill. We will die. The same is true with our economy. Money is the blood of our economy. And if the blood circulation of the economy, the money circulation stops, so the economy will get ill. If we look in any textbooks, we find two major functions of money. The first function is that it's supposed to facilitate the exchange of real goods and services. On the other side, we learn that money is supposed to be a medium to hoard, to hoard values, to store values. Well, those two functions are pretty contradictory. So as the money cannot circulate the economy and facilitate the interchange of goods, the exchange of goods and services, and at the same time be stored under the pillow. From this contradiction in the end come about all those big problems in the world. The only reason why we do not store money but under the pillow, and the only reason why we still don't have a strong deflation is that we have an incentive to lend our money out. And this incentive is the interest rate. Interest is a reward to abstain from liquidity, in the, as Keynes called it. To come back to the metaphor of money as the blood of the human body. So if If money is the blood of the human body, interest is the drug that maintains money circulating. But as any drug use for a prolonged period of time brings along strong negative side effects, also interest does. Unfortunately, this is not well understood in economics. We can understand this or try to understand this, taking a look on how financial assets double. If we have a bank account with a 5% interest rate, annual interest rate, how long will it last until the bank account will have doubled? Well, that will be 15 years. So in 15 years, 100 euros will be 200. 15 years later, 400, 15 years later, 800, and so on. So this is an exponential function. It starts very slow, but then it gets very fast. And this is even true if interests are really low. For even if they are with interest rates are very low, at some moment the bank account will have doubled. And always, if something doubles, it's an exponential function. Only that if interest rate is lower, the flat part of the curve is larger, but it's still an exponential function. And it's even true if we withdraw the interest from the principal. For the interest will, in some part of the economy, end up in another bank account and yield interest. Again, interest. So taking the economy as a whole and taking all bank accounts together, the money supply, which is all bank accounts taken together, develops exponentially. And you can see this in any country of the world. You can look it up for any country, whatever you want. If you take the time period only long enough, money supply you will see that money supply will follow an exponential function. This is very difficult for us to understand since nothing in nature produces forever exponentially, except cancer. Well, and that even cancer is not for always, because if the person dies, then also the cancer will not grow anymore. So this is very difficult for us to understand since nothing in nature grows forever exponentially. To better understand this idea, we can ask the question, imagine Jesus had inherited just 1 cent from his father Joseph, and if he would have put this in a bank account with a 5% annual interest rates, how much would this bank account be? What would be the number in this bank account? Of course, Jesus would not have done this because the Bible prohibits the charging interest, but if he had done it, so the bank account today would be 400 billion planets Earth of pure fine gold. So we can already understand that this system will lead to crisis every certain time. But we can also understand that, as any dollar bill states, money is the counterpart of debt. If we bring money to the bank will have to lend this out. Otherwise, they won't be able to pay the interest on deposits. So any money we deposit in the bank accounts, the bank will try as fast as possible, at least most of it, to lend it out to be able to pay the interest on the deposits. So we have money and we have debt. And we can see this stating on each dollar bill. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. It's not to buy a car or meat or milk. No, it's to pay debts, public and private. There's also a very eloquent adage in Germany. Die Wertpapiere des einen sind die Schulden des anderen. The financial assets or bonds of the one person is the debt of the other. So money is the counterpart of debt. Any money, or most of the money, almost any money that anybody has on its bank account, someone else has to have it as debt. This is all money except for the original money originally created by central banks, which is only today a very small fraction of all the money, since the money in accounts has grown by interest. So we can see what I just said, taking a look, for example, on the money supply of the United States. We see clearly how it develops exponentially, and also the total debt of the United States developed in the same way. It has to be the same way since there's no interest paying without debt. This is a mathematical logic. This is a fact actually. There's no interest paying without debt. So if deposits grow, debt has to grow in the likewise manner. In words of Frederick Soddy, Nobel Prize winner Frederick Soddy, money is a credit-debt relation from which none can effectually escape. And now we can start to understand where financial crises come from. Every 50 to 80 years, we see a financial crisis in all countries. Well, total debt grows exponentially. The production of an economy cannot grow in the same way. So this has to lead to bankruptcy on a larger scale after some time. We can now understand where inflation and speculation comes from. Actually, the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States since 2006 does not publish the money supply M3, which is the most used definition of money supply anymore, because people otherwise might recognize that this grows lots faster than the global production of this country. So if money supply grows faster than the production, then we see inflation. And of course, people do not spend all surpluses in consumer goods, which is why inflation would not necessarily grow so fast. They will spend it in real estates or buy stocks. This is where we see this inflation. It's like the speculation bubbles, the price bubbles, a kind of partial inflation in those markets. Interesting, because there are so many theories on speculation. It's very simple. There's so much money, and the money looks for lucrative investments. We can now understand why we have to grow, where the unsustainability comes from. Total debt growth, so someone has to pay the steadily growing debt burden. So enterprises, if they don't want to lose status quo, they have to sell more. Even if they're lucky and not indebted, so they have to still grow because the people they employ want adjustment for inflation, which you've just seen in the end, it comes from the system. And even if it was not for inflation, there's a third reason why we have to grow. This is interest rate is the opportunity costs for all productive investments. Imagine a business owner he has to decide where he invests surpluses, in his own business, or will he put the money in the bank? He will only invest it in his business if his business yields a return at least as high what the bank would pay, right? So interest is the rhythm, or sets the rhythm after which the economy has to dance. It's not just a fetish. The problem is that exponential growth of anything physical cannot go forever on a finite planet, which was already discussed by Aristotle. First and second law of thermodynamics tell us that we cannot produce something out of nothing. So all products we have will need energy and input. So, and if we keep on growing real GDP, real production every year for centuries in all countries in the world, so we don't have to wonder why we destroy our environment. This is even true for renewable resources, since if we keep on growing and keep on exploiting, then we will exploit even renewable resources some moment on a faster pace than they reproduce. And Herman Daly once said, a little bit sarcastically, but true, anything in nature that does not reproduce itself at the rhythm of interest rate is in danger of extinction. Now we can understand where this dichotomy comes from, that we either grow or see unemployment. We know that this fact, we call it Ocon's law, or we grow or we see unemployment, but we don't really understand why. But now we can understand it. Of course, we have to grow, but if a business would not be able to grow anymore, what will they do? They will try to save up costs in order to maintain the return on investment at least as high as opportunity costs. So, and the highest cost position, the strongest cost position in any business usually is the human workforce. So there's a strong pressure to either grow or replace persons by machines. And if the machine gets old, then it's also looking for a job. And now we can understand the probably most important concern in the world, in Chile at least, but also in other countries, the inequality. Well, inequality comes from because deposits grow and the debt grow. As we said, they grow in a likewise manner. And if you put money supply and debt on the same coordinating system, well, this here is the wealth gap. And using real data from Germany, we see how financial assets grow and how debt grow. The difference between this point and this point, this is the inequality. And it is an unjust inequality. It's not just that inequality grows, it grows in an unjust manner, because those who receive interest here receive it on the cost of those who get indebted and invest the money productively and work hard to be able to pay interest that the ones here receive without moving a finger. Maybe I have put the money I put in the bank account, I have worked with my own effort. But if it starts growing, it starts because of the effort of someone else. Since money does not work, nor does it have offspring, which also already Aristotle a little bit sarcastically pointed out. Actually, interest in Greek is tokos, and tokos also means son or offspring. So money does not have offspring. You can try it. You can take some bills, put them with red light into the corner. They will not cohabit. They will not produce offspring. Unfortunately, we don't really recognize this in economic theory since we use money and capital usually as synonyms. And if we believe that money is a production factor as capital, then we cannot see that there's a difference between producing a real product and selling it with a gain or receiving interest from lending money. Well, the solution I will present here is from Silvio Gesell, which is already 100 years old. But nevertheless, it's not really understood until today, and even less understood that we can solve the big problems in the world with this. Silvio Gesell immigrated from Germany to Argentina and saw two financial crises in between a short time, and he recognized that this has something to do with money that does not flow. Well, the idea is to make money flow without that the positive interest rate is necessary. Remember, there are these two contradictions of the functions of money. On the one side, it's supposed to circulate. On the other side, people want to hoard it. Keynes called this purchase to save the liquidity preference for liquidity. Well, but why do we have this liquidity preference? Everyone wants to hoard. This is natural. Even animals do. Hamsters have it in their cheeks, for example. But the perishability of real goods keeps this natural purchase for saving in check. But our money is easy to store. This is why we want to store and store and store. We want to ever more have money because it's easy to store. So the only reason why we should borrow money to someone is interest rate. Interest rate is the reward to part with liquidity, as Keynes said. So Silvio Gesell was thinking, how can we make money circulate without that the positive interest rate is necessary? So he thought if money was similar, perishable as real goods are, so then people would not store it as long and we cannot charge interest. We can even be happy if someone lends my money out. So otherwise it would lose value. And to do so, he invented this bill where you have to put like stamp scripts or the stamps in the value of like 1 or 2% of the value of the bill every 2 or 3 months. This is not much, but in incentive to not hoard the money under the pillow, to spend it or invest it or to lend it for free. This way, money circulates in the economy. It serves the economy. It serves the interchange of goods without that the interest rate is necessary. Actually, at least not a positive interest rate. This demurrage fee, this incentive not to hoard, actually can be seen as a negative interest rate. So this negative interest rate makes money circulate and does not have the side effects as the positive interest rate does. It was actually successfully proven in Wörgl and many other cities, but the most known one today is Wörgl. You can look it up on YouTube and find the miracle of Wörgl. There was even a movie made, which is called Das Wunder von Wörgl, recently made 2 years ago. The mayor of Wörgl had read the publication of Silvio Gesell and he tried it. Actually, this bill is a bill from Wörgl. It really worked there and pulled the city out of the Great Depression. And it has been also tried by many other cities next to Wörgl, also Liechtenstein, Switzerland, France, Spain, and even in 13 cities in the US, probably because of publication of Irving Fisher, the great Irving Fisher. He also took up this idea and said even that he was considered himself a modest apostle of Silvio Gesell. Unfortunately, today we don't know lots about this and we have almost forgotten it. Alternatives today we could use, of course, electronic banknotes or cash cards with some algorithm that puts this negative interest rates depending on how long we hoard the money and how long or how much money we have on this card. We could also think of a negative interest policy by the central bank, which has even been said by some that the current policy of the European Central Bank is already applying Silver-Gesell, which is, I would doubt, the current negative interest policy of the central bank is not comparable to what Silver-Gesell wanted, because we still can hoard money under the pillow. We are doing it, actually. It has been exponentially growing hoarding of money, cash hoarding in Europe. What is missing is that the bills have to have this negative rate attached to it. Well, and they have some working papers recently coming out from the International Monetary Fund who are talking about this, how to apply the negative interest rate to bills. Well, this is some ideas to apply them to the bills at the end, and they refer even expressively to Silver-Gesell. But meanwhile, the bills can be hoarded under the pillow. It's just not, the ECB is not applying Silver-Gesell, its idea. This is actually why they also have to print ever more money, increasing the money base, because money does not flow. So they're printing ever more of the money that does not flow. Well, and the solution would not be a remedy to all these big problems we have just seen, would be also a system more resilient against external shocks like COVID. Actually, soon we'll see the big financial crisis triggered by COVID, which most people then will say, well, this was COVID, when in fact it was only triggered by COVID. Well, and it would be a remedy not only to, it would not only improve the resilience, economic resilience, it would also be a remedy to get out of the crisis. And instead of getting countries ever more indebted, taking loans, indebting the country, this way making more money flow, and also the central banks printing ever more money, augmenting the money base, ever more money that does not flow. We could have money that flows instead of countries getting indebted. Actually, as I just mentioned, first Irving Fisher and Keynes discussed the idea of Gesell as a solution to get out of the Great Depression. Unfortunately, this is today not very well known. And I was very lucky to see, like in May, the senior vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank in St. Louis talking about this topic. He also said we should use Silver-Gesell money to come out of the crisis. He called this hot money credits. Well, and this system, as I said, I'm pretty sure that we would not be obliged to grow anymore. The obligation to grow and the unsustainability has to do with the interest as opportunity cost of any productive investment. Today we have to grow, but most of the growth does not go into development, but just only increasing inequality. At least if we define development as my dear ex-colleague Manfred Max-Neef, alternative Nobel Prize winner Manfred Max-Neef, has defined in his human scale development approach. Here, development is defined as the satisfaction of fundamental human needs. If we define development as the satisfaction of fundamental human needs, very few parts, very little of our development, of our growth goes into development. Most of our economic growth goes just increasing inequality. If we had neutral money, then we were not obliged to grow. But on the other hand, there was no obstacle to grow in case we had to grow, because maybe some of the fundamental human needs are not satisfied yet. So we can grow, but we don't have to grow. But 100% of any eventual growth would turn into development. And I'm pretty sure that we could come to what Herman Daly once called the steady state economy with a stational equilibrium of input and throughput, and thus have a sustainable economy. Well, this would be then an economy that serves people, not vice versa. As my dear colleague Manfred Max-Neef always pointed out that we need an economy that serves people and not vice versa. This economy, based on this money, would be such an economy. We could also call it market economy without capitalism. We also would need fight, next to changing the money, we'd also need to fight the classic market imperfections like the dominant position or abuse of dominant market position, collusion, price collusion, or unfair competition. Money is not neutral, unlike textbooks teach us. And the non-neutrality of money is probably the main reason for market failure, which unfortunately is not recognized by most economists. If we reformed our money in the way Silver-Gesell once suggested, and also consequently fight classic market imperfection, we have the chance to establish a sustainable and fair economic order. And then we could really have the chance to get close to the ideal of perfect competition. To sum it up, a workable competition, which is the state as close as we can realistically get to the theoretical concept of perfect competition, forces producers to offer the best possible products at the best possible prices to avoid being pushed out of the market. And this should be regarded as favorably as offering good products at good prices is a behavior comparable to charity. In this way, competition causes us to behave as if we loved one another. Well, but even better would be if we also recognize that making money is not an end in itself. Then we could even move from a market economy that serves people to a true economy of neighborly love, in which we achieve allocative efficiency and happiness by serving each other through the use of our talents. And this idea I will develop now. Markets and the concepts of perfect competition nowadays are being increasingly challenged again. And one plausible driver of this dissatisfaction might be the disparity in wealth observed in many countries, also the destruction of the environment, excessive egoism, individualism, and the so-called elbow society in which everyone seems to think only of themselves. Frequent criticism of this or of the competitive economy is that instead of competition, one should use or rely on cooperation. However, free market competition does not impede cooperation. On the contrary, any company can be seen as a cooperation between different stakeholders to produce a certain product or service. Also, companies can cooperate among each other to a certain extent. However, competition law prohibits cooperation in pricing or other competition parameters. And for good reason. Not only does price fixing between companies limit the freedom of the third parties, and not only does it decrease allocative efficiency, such agreements, which are also called collusion or cartels, also contradict neighborly love because they serve to bundle market power with the principal aim of selling a product at a higher price, but without any improvement. Here we see not all forms of cooperation are favorable for a society. Again, workable competition forces producers to offer the best possible products at the best possible prices to avoid being pushed out of the market. Prices goes down at the minimum point of the long-term average total cost curve. This should be regarded as favorably, as offering good products at good prices is a behavior comparable to charity. In this way, competition causes us to behave as if we loved one another. A student once said, well, we shouldn't call it competition. We should call it perfect solidarity. Yes, competition forces us to be perfectly solidary, to make best products at best prices. To further clarify this, let us examine the following example. The Ibis Hotel Group promised all customers that if a problem is not resolved within 50 minutes, the customer will be given a night's stay for free. One might think, wow, such an offer is a realization of neighborly love. But most probably, Ibis is compelled to make this offer by the pressure of heavy competition in the hotel market. Here, for the consumer at least, competition is wonderful. It forces producers to behave in a way that, for all intents and purposes, represents neighborly love. Of course, it would be better if companies actually behaved like this out of love for their neighbor, that is, out of eagerness to contribute to the common good, and not because competition obliges them to do so. Interestingly, company owners who have realized that earning money is not an end in itself do so. I will come to this later. For everyone else, there's competition. That selfishness and individualism and so-called elbow society are associated with the competitive economy may also have been reinforced by a questionable but frequently heard interpretation of much cited Adam Smith quote. and by directing that industry in such a manner as its produce may be of the greatest value, he intends only his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was not part of his intention. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. Often this statement is misinterpreted as expressing the egoistic, self-interested behavior of market participants, which, being controlled by an invisible hand, causes the efficient allocation of resources. In fact, in my understanding, the opposite is true. It is despite our selfishness that competition compels us to behave as if we love one another, to offer the best products at best prices, what in economics we term allocative efficiency. It is not selfishness that drives competition. Rather, competition limits our selfishness. Again, competition compels us to produce good products at good prices, if it works, in order not to be pushed out of the market. Competition compels us to behave as if we loved one another. Selfishness is no virtue, but the opposite of neighborly love and possibly the transcendental cause of all evil in the world. As outlined above, competition promotes allocative efficiency even though we're egoists. Whenever this mechanism that compels us to behave in this way, to produce the best possible products at the best prices, does not work, we speak of market failures. In fact, all market failures can be seen as a failure of the mechanism to compel us to behave in a manner consistent with the love thy neighbor principle. For example, those who love the neighbor will not collude with competitors to artificially create market power with the objective of imposing prices that the customer would not pay in the state of workable competition. Also, there would be no unfair competition such as misleading advertisement or the abuse of a dominant position. And that will lead us to the next point, or the next part, where I draw the utopian model of an economy based on neighborly love. Neighborly love as a new paradigm for economics. Those who have reflected on the meaning of life might conclude that the true purpose of life is to promote the common good by practicing neighborly love. For Christians, both the Old Testament and the New Testament state as the two highest commandments and God's will to love God and to love another. And the two commandments to love one another and to love God are the same, since God is love. And the commandment to love one another seems to be the cornerstone of many other religions too. Love for one's neighbor translates into treating others as we would like to be treated, not to do unto your neighbor what we would not want to be done on us, as we also can read in the Bible in Matthew 7:12. One could say that loving our neighbor is the perfect realization of Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which is, in its best known version, asks us to act only according to the maxim, whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. However, neighborly love is not just reserved for helping people in distress, proselytizing, warning people of occult practices, or observing the 10 Commandments, which in fact can be seen as the concretization of the wider commandment to love one another. No, neighborly love also compels us to make use of our talents for the benefit of the common good. Part of the realization of neighborly love is therefore also to find our vocation and to make it a profession or a life's work, a life's task, so that we may earn our daily bread with our skills. Interestingly, the German word for profession is Beruf, which derives from Berufung, which means vocation. And the word Berufung itself contains the word Ruf, which means call. So the Berufung, it's God's call for special service. A person's vocation is dependent on each individual, as people have different talents. That we should use these talents derives from the commandment to love our neighbor. As part of neighborly love can be regarded the promotion of the common good by bringing in our divine gifts to the community, as a point already explained, both by Paul and Peter. We have different gifts according to the graces given to each of us. If your gift is prophesying, then prophesy in accordance with your faith. If it is serving, then serve. If it is teaching, then teach. If it is to encourage, then give encouragement. If it is giving, then give generously. If it is to lead, do it diligently. If it is to show mercy, do it cheerfully. A person's vocation depends or is dependent on the individual, as people have different talents. So consider, as an example, a conventional factory line. As much as the worker is convinced that he should be thanked for any added value produced, usually the head of the company perceives that he is responsible for such value creation. The inventor, in turn, believes that the company that has bought his patent is profitably thanks to his invention. In fact, all three are wrong. The company owner, the inventor, and the worker are jointly involved in the creation of value. Everyone has their place in the world. No one can do without the other. The inventor, as a scientist or engineer, often is not a good entrepreneur. The entrepreneur cannot produce products without someone putting them together on the production line. And the worker on the assembly line might not have the talent to run a business. In this regard, every human being can be seen as part or slice of the great puzzle of love that may not be fully overseen or understood by each individual, but to which everyone can still contribute to by consistently practicing neighborly love through his or her talents. This can be deemed a principal part of the realization of neighborly love, because we can help others the most by utilizing the talents we have been endowed with. In economics, this would be described as allocative efficiency, the form of the best allocation of resources, or in the words of David Ricardo, the exploitation of comparative advantages, which are here our individual talents. So when we use our talents and gifts to perform the task we are best suited to, we will promote the common good in the best way possible. Furthermore, one might argue that we harm our neighbor if we occupy a job position for which we were not actually suited, and thus prevent other people from doing this work. Here, to use an expression made famous by Abraham Maslow, another person could reach self-actualization in this role. This could be linked to trying to force a piece of a puzzle into a place it does not belong. This way, we do not only destroy the slice, but also the puzzle will never be made whole again, since the slice will be missing on the location where it was planned to go by the creator of the puzzle. In this sense, the so-called Pareto efficiency will never be reached as long as persons occupy a job in which they do not use their special talents. Pareto efficiency, according to Italian economist Wilfredo Pareto, is another frequently used definition of efficiency in economics. A society is Pareto efficient if it is impossible to reallocate resources so as to make any individual better off without making at least one individual worse off. However, as long as there's just one person in an economy occupying a job in which they do not use their talents effectively, the society cannot be Pareto efficient. The person who holds a job they are not made for improves the well-being of all, including their own, by looking for a job in which they can actually make their special contribution to society. At the same time, the new vacancy gives another person the opportunity to self-actualize and contribute to the common good with their talents. And now we can answer the old and famous question of whether we work to live or live to work. The answer is that we live to work. at least if we agree that we live to contribute to the common good with our talents. Then work is no punishment, but a blessing. From a Christian perspective, and if we make use of our vocation, this offers us the possibility to help God in his creation, to become a sort of co-creator and participate in the divine creativity. Insofar, we can conclude that it is our very duty to use our gifts and talents for the benefit of all, and not only as an exercise through which to earn money. I will explore this idea more fully now. Does it make a difference which parts of our body we make use of? Is it therefore not true that anyone who does an activity not out of love, but only for the sake of making money is basically prostituting himself or herself? Of course, we have to earn money, but not as an end in itself. Indeed, even Aristotle refused what he called grammatistics, the earning of money as an end in itself. Grammatistics can be seen as the opposite of what Aristotle used to call oikonomia, which is the efficient use of the household resources. Even though the term economics finds its origin in the Greek oikonomia, today, when we speak of economics, we usually refer to what Aristotle described as grammatistics. That earning money should not become an end in itself can actually also be deduced from the teaching of Christ, who encouraged us to do good without expect nothing in return, like in Luke 6:35. This verse has to be read in conjunction with the request to be faithful and not worry about the future. Just as God gave the birds food, he would not allow people to starve. This parable is not a call to idleness or to stop working. Rather, it means that when we do our daily work, we do not need to worry about our livelihoods. Hence, this parable could be interpreted as a call to accept a job because it enables us to make a special contribution to society rather than simply because it pays well. Well, the big question is how to find out what our talents are. We should, as explained above, earn our daily bread with an activity that corresponds to our vocation. This is an activity that gives us personal fulfillment and satisfaction, something we love to do. An activity we love is an activity we would not undertake without expected financial reward. And this is why we can find out what our vocation is by selecting an activity that we would dedicate ourselves to, even if we did not get paid in monetary units for it. Probably a good way to answer the question of whether or not we are employing our talents in a certain job is to ask if we would do this work even on the last day of our lives, assuming we knew that day, what day that was. The motivation behind any activity that we perform on our last day would certainly not be the pursuit of money or recognition. In this way, the founder of Apple Computers, Steve Jobs, once remarked at the keynote speech in Stanford University that everything in life is about love. You've got to find what you love. And this is true for your work as it is true for our lovers. The only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Wow. In his address, Steve Jobs confessed that since he was 17 years old, he had asked himself every morning that if this day were his last day in his life, would he do what he was going to do this day? And when the answer had been no in too many days in the row, he said then he knew that he needed to change something. On the last day of our lives, we will do only activities we love to do. And these are just activities for which we have a special talent. This is because when we feel that we are doing something very special for the benefit of others, we feel happy. It is precisely serving others with our talents what gives us true pleasure. Indeed, serving others through an activity that someone else might do better is certainly less satisfactory, as we do not feel we have given a special contribution to the well-being of others. On our last day of our life, we will not be pursuing such an activity. This leads us to the next point. There's no clear correlation between happiness and income. Those countries that achieve the highest marks in the so-called Happy Planet Index are not those considered to be the most developed ones. Indeed, in economics, a new discipline has sprung up in recent years, the economics of happiness. But even if we measure development alternatively from GDP, maybe measuring the satisfaction of fundamental human needs using the fundamental human needs matrix of Max Neff, it is doubtful that development and happiness would be clearly correlated. At the United Nations conference in 2012, which debated on the gross national happiness, there was a sign with a wise inscription. If you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. If you want happiness for a month, get married. If you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. If you want happiness for a lifetime, help someone else. Wow. This means if we truly want long-lasting happiness, we should aim to constantly help and serve others. Here, I do not refer to happiness as the superficial materialistic joy we feel after having bought a new car, but a deeper sense of inner fulfillment that might come from the intuitive knowledge that you're contributing to the divine puzzle of love, to again use this metaphor. If we appreciate that the purpose of life is not to make as much money as possible, but to earn money with an activity that we would undertake even without the promise of any monetary gain, and even on the last day of our life, then this will make us truly happy. It will make us happy because we feel that we're making a contribution to the common good. And unlike Aristotle in his Nicomachean Ethics, I do not consider felicitousness, the eudaimonia, to be the highest aspirational good. The pursuit of happiness as an end in itself might even be considered as superficial as the pursuit of money or recognition. Rather, true happiness can be considered as being a compensation for achieving the highest goal, the realization of neighborly love. This can also be actually derived from the German word felicitousness, Glückseligkeit, in which the words happiness, Glück, and soul, Seele, are combined. Felicitousness is the state in which the soul is happy. For many, the only reason to work is to earn money and, in doing so, being successful. Such a rationale fits in the concept of the so-called homo economicus. On the other hand, the economics of love is about serving each other as a way of reaching true and lasting happiness. Although a monetary reward in this model is not an end in itself, we might also be more economically successful if we make use of our talents. A person who uses their talents for a certain task will most likely perform it better than someone who does the same activity reluctantly and only for the sake of gaining money. For example, in the long run, it is foreseeable that someone with a talent for cooking will be more successful as a cook than if he tried to construct machines as a mediocre engineer. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, serves here as a perfect example. Some readers might now criticize that there are also activities that one does not enjoy doing, such simple, boring activities. But I'm convinced that, as St. Paul states in Romans 12, every person has gifts, and there are also people who are made to perform simple activities and even prefer to do those because they would be overstrained with others, more sophisticated jobs. Conversely, someone who has a talent for engineering or science will be bored with simple activities that require little concentration. And this person will feel that they are wasting their life and will not undertake such an activity with joy and dedication. And maybe this person would be so bored by this simple task that they would perform to a lower standard than a person who's less blessed with abilities, but who would do the job with joy, feeling that they are doing something useful and in that contributing to the positive development of a society. That is to say, even with tasks that many would be reluctant to perform, others might realize self-actualization and be economically successful. For simple tasks, one too can make a valuable contribution to the well-being of all. This is why there is no such thing as low category jobs, all of great importance. However, I stress here that this is only the case if one was created for such simple activity. Using our talents for the benefit of all as the fulfillment of neighborly love and the transcendental meaning of life might even contribute to the realization of freedom. Freedom, as we learn from Kant, is the state of being unconstrained by other people's arbitrary choices. This also means that the freedom of others should not be limited by our own compelling arbitrariness. Well, that in turn means that we should not occupy a job other people are better suited for. We can understand that the realization of freedom is connected herewith when we recognize that freedom does not necessarily depend on external circumstances. For example, someone sitting in their office all day may be less exposed to the open air than someone in prison who might be allowed to do sports in the prison's yard. However, the person does not necessarily feel imprisoned, at least not if they enjoy and love their job. Instead, they feel that their work is making a valuable contribution to the well-being of all. On the other hand, someone who works the whole day outside, for example, on the construction site or on the field, may feel less free than someone sitting in the office all day if they feel compelled to do the work in order to survive. The difference between a slave and a free man is that the free man is doing his job out of free will. That is to say, voluntary and not only to survive. Serving others with our talents also might reduce individualism. Steadily growing individualism and the so-called elbow society are not a side effect of competition as something. Rather, the elbow society comes about because people do not realize that their purpose in life should be to promote the common good instead of accumulating as much, mostly virtual, wealth as possible. After all, the Bible is true in the fact that we cannot serve God and money at the same time. When we understand this, selfish behavior becomes contradictory. There would be no people working full-time as speculators or living of interest, as these activities do not contribute to the well-being of others, but rather exist at the expense of others. It is precisely because most people have not yet come to this deeper understanding of the meaning of life that we need a workable competition that limits our egoism and its related vices. We can now understand the greed for accumulating ever more monetary units by people who already earn so much that they won't be able to spend their income in a meaningful manner during their lifetime. Well, they do not like their job. It is possible they would not work at all if not for the sake of money. However, the intuition tells them that they are wasting their life. Indeed, because they only work for the money they get, any merit becomes unsatisfactory. No merit in the world can make up for lost time. Making money for those people thus becomes a kind of addiction, where the dosage has to be increased on a regular basis to achieve a short-term feeling of superficial happiness, a small compensation for the feeling of wasting their life. Using one's talents also helps to make the society more just. Plato philosophized on this topic and incorporated it into his theory of justice. According to Plato, justice is when everyone minds his own business and refrains from meddling in other affairs. Using one's talents also helps to make the society more just. In fact, one can deduce the obligation to use one's talents and also the aspect of justice derived thereof from the Bible. Here we learn that God is just and also that God is love. Well, thus infringing against the commandment to love one another is a violation of justice. Furthermore, the Holy Scripture teaches us that there is righteousness when one lives in love and keeps God's commandment, as the use of one's talents for the benefit of all can be seen as a part of the realization of neighborly love. Exercising any activity solely for the sake of monetary gain and not making use of our special abilities and talents becomes a violation of the commandment to love one another and thus justice. Mediocrity and, above all, laziness are well-known vices. These may come about from the fact that many people would only do a job in order to earn their daily bread. When they do not love their job and only work for money, they do not undertake it with real dedication and mindfulness. Without supervision, these people do little work or none at all. Such behavior occurs unrelated to pay scale. A good salary alone is hardly likely to motivate an employee to carry out their task more conscientiously if they do not feel joy in the performance of their work. Mediocrity is not found in people who do their work with joy, or at least much less frequently. If all people were to do their work with such a dedication, and above all with love, control would no longer be necessary. The well-used adage, trust is good, but control is better, would be turned upside down. An economy of neighborly love, therefore, also would be an economy of trust. Incidentally, I know a craftsman who is doing well economically, despite having no higher education. He receives big orders and builds entire houses because word is spread that he does good work for a fair price. He also makes a happy impression, which confirms what you have already outlined above. The person who carries out their work with love and dedication ultimately also serves themselves to happiness and economic success. Business owners who've understood that making money is not an end in itself and that their job is to contribute to society through their products and services will behave differently to most other companies. A notable example in Chile is a company that sells latte, mineral water. On the label of this bottle, the buyer is assured that 100% of the profit will be donated to charity. Indeed, the brand name's latte comes from the phrase late tu corazón, your heart beats. And as explained on the label, this relates to the feeling that the purchaser can expect, knowing that their purchase has had a positive impact. The company's website announces that nearly €1 million have been donated so far. There is real potential for this corporate concept to pioneer a new generation of businesses, in my opinion. The fact that all surpluses are donated does not necessarily mean that the owner works completely free of charge. If the owners pay a fair salary to themselves, that is a salary the owner could gain as an employee somewhere else with the same talent, time and knowledge investment, with the same production factors invested, they do not contradict the charitable ambitions, as long as all other surpluses are donated or reinvested. Could all companies operate in such a fashion, in such a manner? The answer is yes, they could, at least if they acknowledged that the purpose of their existence is to contribute to the well-being of society with their products. Such an entrepreneur would be happy to see people using their products because that is what they made them for. If there was a surplus at the end of the year, such an entrepreneur would donate their surpluses and or raise the salaries for the employees or reduce the prices for the products in the following year. This process would truly create shared value. A concept made known by Porter and Kramer. Of course, such an entrepreneur would not exploit a dominant position if they were able to have, if they had one. They would also not agree with competitors on prices, that is to say, form cartels. Such behavior makes little sense if one sees the purpose of their existence in living and practicing neighborly love. On the contrary, the entrepreneur would endeavor voluntarily and without competition having to force them to do so, to offer their products at lower than rather than higher prices, since they desire to contribute to the customer well-being. And he would not charge interest. Competition law prohibiting the abuse of a dominant market position, price fixing, and unfair behaviors, which are the three pillars of perfect competition, would no longer be necessary if all entrepreneurs thought that way. Such a market economy would serve people by allowing them the freedom to serve one another. This would truly be an economy of neighborly love. In other words, we may achieve allocative efficiency without the need for market pressure. Voluntarily, all people would offer the best possible products at the best possible prices. And this in turn would nullify many of the reasons for market failure. The economy of neighborly love is an economy in which the wish to best serve one another, not market competition, is the principal driver behind the production of good products at good prices. Without stress and fear for economic survival, production would be efficient. People would be happy because they would feel that they made a special contribution to the well-being of all, and in so doing, provided their lives a greater meaning. Unfortunately, most people are still far away from understanding this meaning of life. Meanwhile, we do need competition and a monetary reform to limit our selfishness. If you want to read about the first part of the presentation, which talked about the inneutrality of money, the problems that this brings about and how these problems can be fixed, I recommend this book chapter, Smarter Money for Smarter Cities. If you want to read about the second part of the development of the economy of neighborly love, I recommend a chapter in this book. And if you want a large book chapter, including both, I recommend this book chapter, Neues Geld für neue Ökonomie, which first talks about the money topic, then about the social and the justice aspects of the inequality that produces this unnatural money, unnatural and unneutral money. And then I try the bridge to the economy of neighborly love. All that I talk today in one text, but it is in German. Thank you very much.